is unique, distinct, and wonderful about fundraising in rural and small town communities? Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the Fundraising School. And I want to remind you, if you haven't done so already, if you can, participate in your local AFP chapter. And if you can put the resources together every year, every so many years that you can afford to do so in time and financial resource, go to AFP Icon, because when you do, you get to see wonderful workshops led by experts such as Julie Bianchi, who I had a good fortune to see at AFP Icon in 2025 in Seattle. And Julie, what a delight to have you with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be here, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Julie is with Cloudbreak Collective, and you are, help me with the title. You're not the campaign director. You are?
The campaign practice director. So
what is a campaign practice director? And tell us about your organization.
Yeah, so we're a team of about 20 independent consultants who work all over the Northwest and sometimes even the West Coast of the country, although we can and do work in other places as well. But our common thread is that we like to work in small communities and with organizations that are really focused on grassroots fundraising. And we work in the areas of grant writing, sustainable fundraising, and capital campaigns or special campaigns. And so I oversee that piece of it, working with small organizations that have big visions. So these are big campaigns, even if the numbers seem small compared to a big university or a hospital.
And you talked about the U.S. Northwest. Are you in Seattle?
I'm actually based in a small community north of Seattle, Whidbey Island.
All right. Well, I had a chance to go to Anacortes back in the day, and I wonder if that's maybe in your neck of the woods, literally there. Beautiful area of the continental United States. So, Julie, what is the passion for you on rural philanthropy, small towns, and the uniqueness and distinctiveness of fundraising in those types of communities?
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in a small town, and I currently live in a small town, but I did a lot of work with big organizations in big cities in between that. And I certainly saw how many resources were available to large organizations for grant writing with big teams of fundraisers. And then when I returned back to my own small community and started to do fundraising work, I quickly realized that the same resources weren't more obviously available in these communities, but there are resources if you look beyond just financial resources to make these visions possible. And so part of my passion is helping to connect those resources to these small communities with these big visions. And oftentimes in these small communities, nonprofits are the ones helping to fill the gaps, especially as more people are migrating out to more rural or smaller community areas. Nonprofits are the ones stepping in to help fix those infrastructure challenges.
You know, as you're responding there, here I am sitting in the state of Indiana, and our native son, John Mellencamp, singing, "I was born in a small town." And here you are, Julie. You are so uniquely situated because you have a small town heritage. You have worked for larger nonprofits, and that's where I'm going with this question. And then kind of back to your small town roots, you are uniquely situated to notice those differences and those distinctions. What are some of those? Because you've worked for larger nonprofits before, and now you're consulting specifically with those grassroots, rural community, small town, wonderful nonprofit organizations. What are some of those bigger differences that stand out?
Well, just in general, for context, 1 in 5 Americans lives in rural America. So that's, broadly. And then 97% of all nonprofits have budgets of less than 5 million. So you start to zoom in on this area. And when you look at the rural funding divide, there's a huge funding divide. So 18% of the total U.S. population lives in these rural areas, but 8% of total spending for nonprofits goes to rural areas. So there's that sense of a lack of resources and a lot of mentality around scarcity in these smaller areas. And to some extent, it's true. But when you look at these small communities trying to find the resources, there's not many foundations in those communities. There might be one or two, maybe a community foundation maybe a family foundation. There's not a huge visible number of philanthropists who are, out there making huge gifts. They might quietly be living in those communities, but it might not be as obvious. And there's just not as much public funding flowing to smaller communities, even though the needs are great. The amount of people living in poverty in these areas is around 22%. But the amount of funding that gets funneled to that, as I mentioned, is not commiserate.
Yeah, and if we're just talking about philanthropic funding, just rounding, let's just say it was $500 billion of funding in a particular year, higher than that than we know from recent Giving USA statistics. But just to keep the number simple, 20% of that would be $100 billion. And what you're saying is about 20% of the population is living in these rural communities, and it's not 20% of the philanthropic funding going to these rural communities. And Julie, so let's focus, and thank you for that wonderful macro description to help all of us understand the opportunities and the challenges. But now as you work with small town fundraisers and they're listening to this podcast, what are some of those words of advice and wisdom when they say, hey, we do have a smaller population. It's wonderful to live here. We're so thrilled to live here, but we don't have as many people to fundraise from or foundations who are located in or near our communities. How can you help encourage them to have that growth mindset and that sense of possibility as they fundraise?
Well, what I love about living in a small town and working in small communities is that mentality of no one's coming to save us. And it's always been the case that there's this sense of, if it's going to be, it's up to us. There's lots of stories that get passed around where people really have, whether it's barn raisings or coming together to make sure everybody has enough food. I think in the session, I told the story about in my own town, a store owner during the Depression was just giving food to people, even if they couldn't pay. So there's that mentality baked into these small communities that we're going to make it happen because it's up to us to survive. So with that, one of the things that we look at when we're in a small community working with an organization to build up their fundraising program is how can we unlock some of that in-kind support? How can we match it to what's in your budget that you absolutely need to operate? How can you connect with a local business owner to map, okay, this is what you have to contribute, this is what we need to operate, and make that come together in a way that doesn't involve financial exchange. So oftentimes that is a part of the puzzle. And it's also looking at the grassroots support. And so there is an impulse to give, just like in every part of the country, particularly so in these small communities. And so it's helping people to connect to the opportunities. And so we often look at who's your spark plug in the community. Is it the mayor? Is it the local pastor at the church? Or is it the PTA president? Who can be that person that is visible, is an influencer among certain segments? So we do a lot of community mapping. We sit down and look at, okay, if you want to tap into this neighborhood or this group, who do we need to really unlock their passion and get them excited about the cause so they can go out and be the spark plug and share the opportunity to contribute, whether it's financial or volunteer support or in kind, whatever it might be. And it's
Really,
yeah.
Please continue.
And I was going to mention also, it's also being creative about not only in-kind support, but what are other ways that people can contribute resources. And in smaller communities, a lot of times it is volunteer. It's that gift of time is a huge factor, more so than you see in urban areas of people almost fulfilling staff-like roles in these communities in order to make the organization operate.
Thank you for that context. And you are demonstrating, revealing why I enjoyed your workshop so much with good practical examples of these distinctions in rural communities and in small towns. And I know another one that you had that really struck me was this issue of donor recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us have donors who want to stay anonymous, but maybe more so in a small town. Can you help our audience understand that?
Yeah, so I shared with you the lone town philanthropist concept. I'm seeing more and more in campaign situations where you have significant gifts flowing to these smaller organizations from smaller communities. But one that I did recently was we were raising nearly $3 million. And the top five donors to the campaign, four of them wanted to remain anonymous because, you'll know them in the grocery store line. You'll know who they are. Maybe they're the coach of your team, but they don't necessarily want to parade around that they're making, in some cases, $500,000 million gifts, which for small communities, that's huge. And they prefer to remain anonymous. So that is another reason to really build out the grassroots fundraising effort and to recognize those donors either in an anonymous way or not listing out the dollar amounts given. A lot of even people making significant gifts are preferring to have their name listed alongside people who gave $5 or $10 alphabetically without any dollar amount listed. I'm seeing a lot more of that in campaigns and just giving in general. And beyond that, if there is recognition, looking at, can it be something that's functional for the community? So there might be names on the bench, but at least the community can come and sit on the bench, and it conveys to everyone that, this particular project was built by the community. We all came together. We all contributed. Doesn't matter how much each one of us gave. We each gave the most that we could give to make this happen. And with that, it's also, I'm seeing more and more recognition that's not only about financial dollars, but also recognizing on that same list people who gave significant time, significant in-kind resources, and recognizing that all of those pieces, especially in small communities, are reflections of significant resources that somebody is contributing because they are very passionate about the cause.
Wonderful insights, Julie. Thank you for enlightening me and our audience with that. I want to ask you about digital fundraising. I've had this conversation with our school's good friend, Tom Leedy. He leads the DECO Foundation that funds only in rural communities. The backstory there is Chet DECO, with his corporation, a manufacturing corporation, always set up shop in rural counties because he had a strong belief in the rural work ethic from his own upbringing in rural Minnesota. We also have a good partnership with Matt Ellman of the Rural Philanthropy Institute. And I've spoken with both of them, wondering about this issue of digital. Is digital fundraising an equalizer in rural communities? In that if I don't have as many local residents as maybe some of my other nonprofit colleagues in medium and larger towns, that I can still reach out in digital ways and maybe find the former resident, the kid who grew up, went to the University of Washington, decided to set up shop in Seattle. It's still a couple of hours away from the northern part of the state, but I can reach them through digital means. Is that a thing? Is that helping our neighbors in rural communities?
Yes, I do see that happening, especially in the context of peer-to-peer fundraising. So having, say, a month of giving or a day of giving, and you activate people who are maybe your spark plugs, your local champions, and asking them, okay, set a goal for yourself, reach out to your network. So it's activating your network. And maybe your network involves people who live far afield, but they're supporting because they care about you. And this is a cause that you're sharing. So that is a way to bring in some resources, although we see that the people who are the most long-term devoted donors are typically the ones who live in your own community. But it is a way to expand and diversify the funding that's coming in.
Thank you for that. I want to ask you then, from the perspective of folks who don't live in rural communities, don't live in small towns, but who are sincere in wanting to help, right? Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, there's this resilience of, hey, we've got to do this ourselves. We're going to figure this out locally, and we need to. And somebody well-intended comes along and says, hey, I'm aware of a resource here, a foundation there, a method in this other way. I know a lot of times, and again, I've learned this from my good friend, Matt Ellman, that folks in small towns can view themselves as, we're just a place of extraction. People come here for our crops or our minerals or, something of that. They come here for vacation, but they don't really care about our community. Yeah. But then somebody well-intended does come along. What advice do you have for us if we said, look, we do want to help support, raise resources, strengthen nonprofits in rural communities. Ideally, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I live in a town that is a vacation town, a weekender town or a summer town. And so you get that sense of people coming through and, dining in the restaurants, being there for a moment when the sun is out. And then, when the rain arrives, not being there for most of the months of the year to support the local businesses or the local nonprofits who are making that summer, operate. And so that year-round sense of, okay, don't just show up, a few weeks of the year, but if you have a vacation home here, support the local nonprofits. We see a lot of people who own part-time residents, not necessarily supporting local nonprofits. They are supporting where they live the rest of the year and not understanding how a local ecosystem of nonprofits really needs that support so that they can support people who are working in the restaurants or working in the grocery stores year round. And so I would just say, yes, if you're coming and spending any amount of time in a local community, think about what can you do to make it operate year round.
And tourism is a wonderful thing. And tourism is great for economic opportunity for local residents. Maybe the next time I'm on vacation in a wonderful place like Anacortes, I look for that charity to support while I'm there as well.
Exactly.
While I also enjoy that beautiful area. Julie, finally, what advice do you have then, just overall, for, again, fundraisers in rural communities, small towns, any other advice that you'd like to share with them as they fundraise?
Well, I would just say it's hard right now for many organizations to do this, but those organizations that can operate from a place of abundance and looking for possibility and collaboration are going to do a whole lot better through any sort of downward economic cycle or time periods of, cut public funding. The more that you can lean into fundraising, lean into building relationships with your donors and not shy away or not pull back, those are the organizations that are going to come out on the other side in a much stronger place because they operated from this place of abundance, possibility, and connection.
Students who attend our classes, Julie, are going to think I asked you to say that because they hear that same message from the fundraising school all the time. Isn't our public cause worth it? The people we serve, the animal welfare, the environment, the arts, the health, the education, all of it. And we need to have that sense of abundance and possibility. Julie Bianchi is the campaign practice director of Cloudbreak Collective, based in the northwestern region of the United States. Julie, what a delight to have you with us. Thank you for joining us on the Fundraising School's First Day podcast.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
And we welcome one and all to our classes at the Fundraising School, more than 24, leading to 5 certificates. We're in person, including in Seattle, and we are also online anywhere across the world. We have customized training. We can design courses just for your nonprofit, including in a rural community, by the way, and just for your board, your association, your region. We have quarterly webinars. We have these weekly podcasts, all of our knowledge gathered in our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, the book now out in its 5th edition. You can find all of this online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. Again, thanks to Julie Bianchi for being with us in this podcast produced by Jennifer Boffman, CFRM, and the Emmy Award winner, Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. Now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.